Hi, Katie Anderson here, and I'm really thrilled to be interviewing Nick Katko and Mike DeLuca today about their new book, Practicing Lean Accounting. And to dive into this is an absolute must read for any lean practitioner. You can see all my stickies. I was diving into it this week, and not only is it really well written and accessible, there are golden nuggets for how to apply this thinking and practice in your organization. So I'm really excited to get started. So welcome, Nick and Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Glad to be here.
So for the context of our audience, wanted to ask you, what is lean accounting and what is its benefit over traditional accounting practices?
I'll take the first part of that question. Mike can take the second. Lean accounting is the application of lean thinking practices in all accounting processes, right? It's no different than operationally, but there's some unique aspects of it which Mike can address.
And I think one of the benefits, because you asked about the benefits as well, is, like Nick said, all accounting processes, but accounting does a couple of different types of things. We do transactional things like pay vendors and bill customers, but we also provide information that the organization uses to make decisions. So one of the really pivotal benefits of lean accounting in an organization is really helping inform decisions that align with the lean strategy, and really helping the organization do a much more effective job at interpreting information in order to make those decisions around the strategy.
Great, thank you. And you teed me up perfectly, because I wanted to read a short passage at the beginning of the book. This transitions to my next question. You talk about how a lean strategy focuses on people-centered learning and improvement, which I wholeheartedly endorse. And then you go on to say, because learning and improvement takes time, lean thinking usually conflicts with short-term, make the numbers type of thinking when it comes to company financial performance. Accounting can play a significant role in leading a company away from short-term financial thinking about lean to learning about how to make the connections between people-based improvement and financial outcomes. In order to lead this effort, accounting must understand the economics of lean. And I really want to dive into my second question as it relates to that. And this is just such a helpful book. But for our audience, what is one of the biggest challenges or barriers you've found organizations have needed to address in order to make this shift from more traditional accounting to lean accounting?
Go ahead, Mike, you start.
I think one of the challenges is that a lot of the information we prepare and analyze and provide in accounting is looking at financial performance that's retrospective. And the really big shift that connects to the quote that you just read is the importance of understanding, because now everyone is learning and improving on a continuous basis, and we might get near-term or long-term benefits from those improvements, or both. They can show up in lots of different ways. So finance and accounting needs to understand, how do those processes that are happening now influence future financial outcomes? So it's really that shift in thinking.
Yeah, I think I'm a former CFO. I'm a CPA. So I have my financial background. I understand. I've been there. The accounting is a profession. We learn how to close the books and produce financial statements. And we learn that, we get into our jobs, and that's what we quote unquote do. And it's about getting it done. And it's all about, being a better accounting professional. And so, one of the things is how do you broaden yourself, especially in a lean organization, to, not just understand the strategy by preparing a financial forecast, but understand what does lean thinking really mean to the organization, and how is it going to transform it? And I think that's one of the biggest barriers, because I've worked with some companies where the finance people, they get lean, and then there's others that don't get it.
Yeah. That's been my experience too. working in several different healthcare companies and organizations that were starting a lean journey, and now as a consultant working with, all different industries. And that's a nice transition to my next question, because I think this is particularly relevant for those people, the individuals in the groups within organizations trying to lead lean strategy and lead a lean transformation. So one of the things is I've observed from my own experience and others is that performance improvement or operational excellence or lean promotion departments are often asked by their senior leaders that maybe have more of a traditional accounting background or a traditional management background to justify themselves as a cost center, or really focusing on choosing projects that really only have a tangible direct cost savings that can be seen in the short term. What is your advice for how these teams should respond to their senior leaders, or some things that they can do to help them understand the real purpose of their group as a learning and performance improvement department as well?
Well, I think, one thing is, we address this in the book, is that not every improvement generates a cost savings, especially short term. And so it's an educational opportunity where, people in the lean office, they have to be able to educate others in the organization. What does lean mean? What does a basic improvement opportunity generate in terms of like more economic value than just financial cost savings? And it's, lean, I think you almost have to take those people that are saying cost savings or justify your existence and let them participate in an improvement event to see what really happens. Because in their head, it's just nebulous. And so what do? They default to financial thinking.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how, a large organization that I know right now has really downsized or almost eliminated much of their whole network of performance improvement individuals because of the need for cost savings. How might you help an organization maybe see the impact of that type of decision making?
I really want to go back to the strategy, the overall strategy of the organization. What is it that the organization is trying to do over the next 3 to 5 or more years related to increasing customer demand, increasing customer satisfaction? What are the quality targets? Those long-term strategic those intentions are largely balanced with, then how is that going to be financially viable? And what I think is missing, and Nick talked about this, is an understanding about how the economics of lean help support that. And so it's almost the short-sighted decision to cut costs in the improvement engine of the organization is gonna, and just to use that engine and car metaphor, is going to mean that the car is going to fall short of the finish line, because it's not going to have the engine to drive the improvement. So I think really understanding the economics of lean, and not just the short-term benefits, and there are some, but really the long-term benefits of what happens when you create capacity and how do you deploy that strategically? What happens when you improve quality, and what does that mean for your ability to drive more demand? All of those questions, I think, need to be considered in a longer term view. And then it's not to say that we just then pause and don't hold ourselves to near-term financial results of the organization as viable. But if that's the main focus, then we're going to miss the long-term prize.
Yeah, great. And for those of you who are listening or reading this, there is a lot of great information in this book about how to look at the accounting process differently and different ways to measure the impact, not just on direct cost savings. So some really good resources in here for how to have those conversations and think about that for your organization. All right, I want to transition a bit now into the process of writing your book and some of the things that you've learned from your partnership and through the process of writing. So your book, 2 authors collaborating together to write one book. So how did you work together in partnership to create this book?
Well, we tried to use lean. and plan the work in single piece flow. And so someone would take point on an initial concept draft for a chapter or a section. The other person would read it. We tried not to do too much rework, right? So there weren't that many rework loops. And honestly, for me, it was really, I could never have written this without partnering with you, Nick, because honestly, the clarity that I got through the iterative process was so much greater than if I had just tried to put out a chapter on my own. So that was a little bit about my experience. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, well, it took us a while to get our rhythm. Took a while. I mean, it was a few, maybe 2 or 3 months to really get the rhythm down, because we tried a couple things, and and then the writing takes some time, and then it takes time to review. But what we did is, one thing we did do is we established weekly meetings where we might not talk about an entire chapter, but we're talking about the book on a weekly basis. And then so we got the rhythm down, and one person wrote, the other we let, as opposed to trying to create an outline. We had a very rough outline, but it was like, okay, I'm going to write this chapter, and then Mike can take it and edit it and add what's missing, and that seemed to work the best. Because I think if you try to do it, when you start writing, there's so much to write. And I found it easier just to write rather than try to do an outline first.
That's great. And I know we talked also, we had a shared connection.
Oh, yeah.
Support of our writing, the wonderful Karen Ross, who coached or did some developmental editing for both of us. So.
And that was weekly standard work as well, was a coaching session with her.
Oh, that's great. Karen read my manuscript and gave me some good feedback. Having that weekly coaching, I'm sure, was a tremendous help. And Karen and I always like to say that 1 + 1 equals way more than 2. And I, as a solo writer, although I did work very closely with Mr. Yoshino on my book, I was the one doing the writing. And I think that having that collaboration can be really powerful and helpful. So that's great to learn from. All right, next question. And I think, Mike, you're the one who noted that you got some clarity as you were writing. So this is a good lead into my next question. What is one thing that you learned or got clarity on about lean accounting through the process of writing the book?
I actually got really clear about the concept of these practices. The way that we've outlined the book is through a series of foundational practices, applied practices, and sustaining practices. And that was something that I don't think either of us necessarily had fully formed in their minds before we started doing this. And it came as a result of working together on developing the content. And for me now is a much clearer way to explain what is lean accounting, how to get started, how to deepen your practice with lean accounting. So that's how it helped me.
Yeah, I have to answer it the same way, because I wrote the Lean CFO about 9 years ago, and it was very like tool based. Okay. And also, teaching and coaching this stuff and consulting on this for almost 20 years, you develop rhythms and habits of how to, talking with a company or whatever. And I was feeling a little bit stale about it and saying, like, there's got to be a better way to explain this. And the idea of explaining lean accounting in terms of practices rather than just things you do was sort of refreshing, because it sort of puts everything in perspective. And also I think it helps people understand, what is it that I have to do? I don't have to just create some numbers. I have to practice. And that's different.
Yes, going back to that concept.
And you never stop practicing.
Right. Yeah. And that ties back to how you start the book. It's all about thinking and a practice and continuous improvement, not just applying the tools. The tools are helpful and supportive, but it's about the practice of using them and the practice of thinking.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what kind of tennis racket you have if you don't practice tennis.
All right. My second to last question, at least that I've prepared, what is a question that you haven't been asked about the book yet that you'd like to answer, either by me or in any other venue? And then what's that question and what is your answer? That's a trick question.
Yeah, it's a trick question. What have I not been asked about the book? Oh gosh, I don't know.
Or what's a question, I'll frame it in a different way.
Yeah.
What's a question you think people should be asking about lean accounting that you'd really like to give them an answer to? And maybe it's something that's in the book, but something
Okay.
you really think that people
How-
should be asking and learning about.
How do you change thinking in people?
Mhm.
That's a great
You know,
question.
especially it doesn't matter if they're senior leaders or in finance or whatever, but when it comes to lean accounting, how do you get people to change their thinking about the approach of accounting and finance? I think that's the one question we tried to address it somehow, but it's, sort of more indirectly throughout the book.
Mhm. There's that conundrum of, is it more effective to think your way into a new way of acting or act your way into a new way of thinking? And since we do talk a lot about thinking and how the thinking needs to become habitual in order to sustain the practices, honestly, it's both. We have to both think and act differently on a consistent basis. And I think that really starts with folks in finance at a leadership or an individual contributor role, starting to ask questions. I mean, honestly, so a question that folks ask a lot is, how do you get started? And I think starting by asking a bunch of questions related specifically to, what is it that I currently do that really helps this organization succeed and thrive? And am I doing that in the most effective way? What's getting in the way for the folks in my team for being really engaged in their work, if anything? So I think starting by asking some questions and being curious is important.
Great, thank you. And my final question for you both is, what is one piece of advice you would offer to other aspiring book authors?
If I were advising myself before I started this, or even advising myself if I chose to write again, I would say, for me, start with what's the payoff for the reader. So you have a lot that you want to share. When the reader is done taking in what you've decided to share, what is it that they are thinking differently, doing differently? What's their payoff? And then work back from that.
Yeah, I think it's what's the story you want to tell? Because a book, even if you're writing a business book, it's really no different than like a novel. You have to have a story in there. And, always write whatever you're writing, write with the reader in mind. And, say it as directly as possible in as few words as possible. Just get to the point.
That's hard work.
It is, yeah, it is.
Yes.
So I have one bonus question then,
Okay.
actually a question I usually lead some of my interviews off with, but I'm going to wrap it up because it ties directly to this. So what is what do you hope the readers take away from this? What is the problem you were trying to solve for them? And why were you inspired to, create this book?
The way I would answer it is they read it and it's inspiration that we can transform accounting into lean accounting.
Yeah, inspiration and enough concrete examples and specifics that it really functions like a practice guide. Like, okay, I would actually reread this chapter because I've tried some things and I've had some success and I've gotten stuck in a couple of places. Let me go back and review that again. I mean, my favorite business books, I've read them multiple times because there's always a new nugget that I'm going to get, or a reinforcing or clarification of my understanding and application of the ideas.
Well, as a reader of your book, I have to say you succeeded in your desire. And so again, I really encourage anyone out there who's working in your organization to have a lean strategy, a lean transformation, to engage your accounting team, read the book, and actually you will be inspired. It's an easy read, and there's so many tangible practices. I wish that the people I was working with many years ago, we had this resource, but it's here now. And so great work, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Nick. And I'm excited that we're going to be giving away 3 copies of the book for 3 readers in the US. So there's more information on how you can register for that in the comments below, or if you're reading this on my blog post, on the blog post as well. So thank you both, and congratulations on a great book.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.